right, do we have everybody back here? Look here.
We have a quorum. We don't have everyone, but Representative Stevens, Judge Bernstein, Judge Marsico, Professor Rago, Senator Street, and Judge Tucker so far.
All
So
right,
we have
I
a
know.
quorum to get started.
Okay, yeah, I know, and I know a couple of folks have let me know that they're going to have some conflicts hopping in and out of other meetings and things that they have. So we'll get moving, and you know, obviously, there's been a lot of information disseminated between the public hearings and then this morning's policy committee meeting. So I think everybody's got the benefit of most of the discussion. So we'll kick off the quarterly Sentencing Commission meeting for September 10th. I'm the chair, State Representative Todd Stevens. And I guess we'll start, Professor Mystic, I think if you'd like to start with a discussion about the executive session that we had at the end of the June meeting, that would be great.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Commissioners. At the end of the last quarterly meeting, I'd asked for an executive session to discuss a litigation-related issue. That discussion took place. There's nothing further to report at this time, so consistent with the open meeting law, I'm providing this notice that the executive session is closed.
All right, terrific. So moving along on our agenda, we'll move to the minutes from the June 4th, 2020 Commission meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from the June 4th meeting?
So moved, Judge Dally.
All right, moved by Judge Dally. Is there a second?
Second, Professor Rago.
Thanks, Professor. All right, it's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of the June 4th Commission meeting. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. The minutes are approved. All right, moving down the agenda. Mark, I think you're up next.
Yeah, thanks. I think we skipped over the public comment period, and so I thought I'd raise that just for a couple things. First, to remind individuals in the public that this is being recorded and that all of the materials for the meeting are available from the Commission's website at pasentencing.us. There is a tab under the news section that will get you right to all of the materials from today's meeting. And then for public comment, if a person is interested in giving comment, please raise your hand or notify. I'll ask Ryan to identify those individuals for the chairman. The testimony or any kind of comments is limited to 5 minutes.
It's a great point. Thanks. I appreciate it. I actually am having trouble finding my actual agenda, so I was working off the action items list, but that would explain why I missed that. I apologize. So Ryan, have there been any indications that there's somebody who'd like to make a public comment?
Not at this time.
All right, just keep us in the loop if that comes up. I appreciate it. All right, so what's next, Mark?
Okay, back on the agenda. Thank you. I appreciate it. We'll go to the executive, administrative, and financial. I'll also note for the record that Senator Langerholtz is joining us by phone.
Right. And I did find my agenda now, so we're good to go.
Well, again, I appreciate all of the efforts by members and by the public in trying to participate. It's a little bit difficult remotely, but for all commission members, there were two major documents provided. One was basically the meeting materials, which is a quick summary, a highlight of things, and that might be the document that's easiest to sort of follow the proceedings with. That includes the agenda and the action items and some basic information. And then the super huge supplemental commission materials, which is over 600 pages, and that I've asked staff to identify pages in that if we're trying to look at a specific issue, but that's really all the background information. So that may be, if you have that available, that may be helpful along the way. So with that, let me start with what is normally tab 3 of your notebook, but in the supplemental materials, it's right at the front. Page 2 is the start of this. And the first thing is just an update on any issues related to membership. We have no changes in membership, so we have members in place, all positions filled as far as the commission membership. And I'll just recognize that October 1st of last year, the commission's organization was reorganized and we had all new appointments. So at the end of the session today, I'll just remind everyone that we'll next year at this time, we'll be coming up to the end of everyone's term, which is different. We used to have staggered terms. So over the course of the next year, I'll be reaching out to all the appointing authorities, reminding them of their responsibility to keep the commission running and keep appointments in place. So that's just a heads up. We have two ex officio agencies of the commission, the Department of Corrections and the Parole Board, and we provide an opportunity at this point in the meeting if either of the representatives, either of the individuals or representatives of their agencies want to make a comment. So I don't know if anyone from the Department of Corrections is on and would like to make any kind of comment. I'll take a break to see if.
I'm not seeing any at this time, Mark.
Okay, thank you. And then the board of the Pennsylvania Parole Board, whether the chairman or anyone from the board wishes to make any comment.
Likewise.
Okay, thank you. And so I just want to express appreciation to both the department and the board for all of their assistance during the past quarter as we planned public hearings and other kind of work with both agencies. For the first time, the commission did a public hearing from the Department of Corrections, and the staff with the department, the secretary, Diana Woodside and Deborah Sod and the superintendents of the institution were incredible in terms of all the arrangements they went through. And I think it was a really positive experience. So kudos and thanks to the Department of Corrections, and the board has been really helpful as we've been working through things like parole guidelines and other things like that. So I want to express my appreciation. Moving on to staff issues, you'll find in the materials, if you just keep moving through, we have one announcement that I'll defer to Eric with any of the details, but Ann Shee, who works in Eric's unit, was recently promoted. She was working the past year in an hourly position, and now she is fully a member of the staff of the commission, so we're really happy about that. Ann has been incredible in working in that unit, and Eric can talk more about that. And when Eric reports out, he can also talk about some of the student interns and grad students that we have. So we'll have an update on that. Another aspect of staff is that we have postdocs. Miranda this morning contributed to the reporting out on the Vital Strategies project, and Matt will be talking later about the posting of another postdoc position. So back to that later. We have several vacancies, and of course they're going to remain open until there's more clarity about the future in terms of funding and so forth. But we have two open positions in Eric's unit, 2 data analysts. And so it's incredible the amount of work that unit has done being down 2 positions, but it's to their credit. They've been doing a great job, and we hope that one of these days we'll be able to give them a little more staff. And then we have a vacant communications position in Ryan's unit, in the education and outreach unit. So unfortunately, those positions remain open and will for a while, but hopefully as we get into the new year, things will improve. Moving on to management and oversight, the first thing I wanted to report out on was the COVID-19 response. And just, again, recognizing staff, just these meetings are huge undertakings. We talk about, it's unfortunate we're not in the same room, and there's all that other positive stuff that comes out of meetings and being together. But I'm just incredibly impressed with the work of our entire staff, like bringing this kind of thing about and putting together a 600-page document to, try to support and show the work that we're trying to do. So just incredible productivity. Throughout the meeting today, you'll hear from the unit managers, but let me just mention a couple things because they've been great. Christy with IT and applications, we have in the last quarter we've ended all external vendors on IT and support, and all of SGS Web is being supported and rebuilt through Christy and her unit. It's been an incredible achievement during very difficult times. And so you'll hear more from Christy about progress on things like SGS Web modules and so forth, but incredible stuff. Research and data analysis, Eric and his team have continued, and they've completed the SIP report that we'll be talking about. They've continued work on some of the projections projects. They've been looking specifically about things like COVID-19 and the changes in sentences and the nature of sentencing over the past 3 to 6 months. So a lot of really important information there. And then also at the same time, really catching up on some of the data related to resentencing. So incredible amount of work in a short period of time. Education and outreach, Ryan will show you some of the work they've been doing, but they had their sort of county tour planned for the first half of the year, and they met with a lot of counties, but then went virtual with a lot of counties, and Ryan will talk about that. But then you'll see all of this other content that's out there, and I think you'll see that it's just been a way of communicating with people and staying current. And there's a lot of other work on their heads, I guess, in terms of data verification and working towards a certification of compliance that we'll talk about later. So again, incredible effort. Jadine and her unit in administration and financial have been doing all of the support work that we could all work remotely. So working with making sure staff are supported, that we reimburse them for their expenses of working remotely, that we make sure they have all of the equipment and supplies that are necessary, and then just helping to plan for the future. We had to go to, because our relationship with the university, we had to sort of come up with a plan for the second half of the year, getting us through December. And the takeaway was, if you're able to work remotely and do your work, you should continue to work remotely. And so because of all the efforts of Jadine and everyone together, we've committed to working remotely for the balance of the year. Now, we can find times to get into offices as necessary, but we're sort of following that practice, and we've been really productive in this kind of setting. So Jadine's been incredible in supporting that and helping us to plan for when we do eventually return to the offices. And then, as you saw this morning and over the last several weeks, Diane has been incredibly helpful with executive and policy support. The 4 proposals we have out there, the 4 public hearings, documenting and quick turnaround time on making available information on the issues raised by all those people we heard from, and then working on other issues like annual report and special tables for the annual report. So you'll hear more about that later, but I just wanted to highlight all of that. You'll hear more details, but they deserve an incredible amount of thanks and gratitude for all the work they've done in a difficult situation. And as leader of that team, Matt has been doing an incredible job just tracking what everyone's doing and providing support, and then moving through big projects like the Vital Strategies project. So, and working with the university and our partners and others. So we've done well and I guess hired well. So I want to thank everyone for their support and efforts there. The next thing I wanted to talk about was diversity, equity, and inclusion. During the last meeting, I took to heart, and I think everyone did, the comments by the members at the start of the meeting. and the need for us to be sort of self-critical about diversity issues and be thinking about race and inequity and a lot of other kind of things like that we say we deal with, but there was a lot more we had to do and have to do. And so first, I want to thank the commission members that helped us, because we purposefully were thinking about how we are more open and how we involve impacted communities when we went into this last round of public hearings. And so the idea of having a public hearing on parole issues at the Department of Corrections and involving a number of people there testifying, and having a public hearing scheduled in McKeesport so that we can at least be in a community that's impacted by some of our decisions. It's tough to have public hearings during a COVID-19 crisis, but at least we sort of started the process. And I think I hope this is a new normal in terms of our engagement with communities and with impacted communities. And I want to just thank the commission members for their help in making connections and bringing all this about, because it leads to the next thing that's happened, which I think is really important and could be great for the future. And that is with the help of a lot of commission members, I was sort of connected with our two historically Black colleges and universities in Pennsylvania. So I've had several discussions with both the president and faculty and administrators from Lincoln University and with Cheyney University. And they have been open and excited and positive about looking for opportunities to work with, to engage with the commission. And so we've been discussing some of the things we have done with a number of other universities, sort of providing data or partnering on research projects or other things like that. But we're also looking at, are there opportunities for student internships or for other types of collaboration? Are there opportunities for us to meet with classes or provide content or use their facilities to be in those communities in terms of engaging in having public hearings, in other kind of outreach efforts? Are there ways of thinking about our need to diversify staff in terms of getting in the loop, in terms of recruitment and other things like that? So I think there's a lot. We've had some really positive first calls, and there's a lot of work to do, but I think there's interest on both sides to really make something of this, and I think that can be really positive in addressing issues that were raised during last meeting. So I thank the members for all of their help in getting this started, and I commit to really trying to see it through and make sure that we do the right thing. You'll find in your materials at page 7 and a statement on diversity, equity, and inclusion that Penn State has. So that's Penn State's diversity statement. And during the last meeting, I think District Attorney Sunday raised the issue about whether the commission, had a diversity statement. Should we have one? And so I included this because all Penn State, all commission staff are Penn State employees, and so we're part of the Penn State community, and this is a diversity statement that we're held to, and that we should aspire to comply with, to build on. But the commission can always develop its own statement, and so I included this in the materials just to again, as a starting point, as we're talking about the commission and making sure the commission is addressing these concerns that are out there. Maybe we have to be more specific in developing our own statement, but we don't have to do it today. I just wanted to put this out as a starting point to say that we heard statements and comments that were made last meeting, and we want to be moving in the right direction here. And to that end, I've had discussions with Penn State on a number of levels, but first with human resources, because the location of our main office in State College presents some problems in terms of recruitment and diversity. And it's not just the commission, it's Penn State, it's the university, and they're doing a lot to try to address it, but a lot more needs to be done. And so I've talked to the liberal arts HR folks about steps we could take whenever we are posting a position or advertising or trying to recruit or looking through applicants we receive, that we can be more inclusive in our approach. And they've committed to working with us in trying to find ways to expand our reach in terms of who we're targeting or how we're sending out notices, and also to help us in terms of that process of reviewing candidates for positions. So one of the things that I think is helpful to the commission is, while the college is committed to that, the college and the university as a whole has really seen that as an important thing they have to do. And so I think we're going to be riding that wave. I hope that we're all trying to build out that whole aspect of how we do recruitment and hires. And I hope that starts getting us towards what we discussed at the last meeting about more staff diversity, whether it's in the State College office or the Harrisburg office. You're going to hear Matt talking about a postdoc position, and we hope that might be another aspect of our sort of educational efforts and research efforts to think about diversity. So I wanted to mention that. And then finally, at the suggestion of the chairman, we've spent quite a bit of time thinking about how we can make information that the commission has more accessible or more useful in terms of thinking about things like race or ethnicity or even gender or other kind of issues. And so Diane has really taken the lead in working on the 2019 annual report to also develop other reports that break out things by race or gender and other kind of factors. And she'll talk about that a little bit later. But I think these are just more things that we're trying to do to start to address totally legitimate issues that were raised during last meeting. So again, I just want to thank members for all of their help in that, and keep us, keep our feet to the fire, whatever. I want to make sure we keep moving this along. So thank you. Let me move on to a couple of other things so that we can get to voting items. The commission has memoranda of understanding with 3 academic institutions. Our main one is with Penn State, but we also have one with Duquesne University School of Law and Villanova University School of Law. And in all of those MOUs, we build into that a teaching component. So traditionally here at Penn State, I would teach 2 undergraduate criminology.
On this Greg Mulju file, I need a motion to modify sentence.
Okay. I'm sorry. And unmuting there by mistake. So anyhow, with these MOUs, we have a teaching requirement. So I have traditionally taught 2 undergraduate classes at Penn State as part of our MOU. And I'm really, really happy to announce that I have transitioned that over to Ryan Myers as, Ryan's head of our education outreach unit. Ryan did some teaching at Penn State Altoona. And last semester, we were team teaching this course. And with great relief and pleasure, Ryan has taken over the course, and so now he'll be teaching that course every semester to fulfill one of the provisions of the MOU with Penn State. I continue to teach a course at Duquesne Law, so fall semesters, sentencing elective at the law school there, and have involved a number of commission members over the years and will continue to, and really appreciate that and love the opportunity especially when we're not in a virtual world of seeing Professor Mystic and Professor Rago on a weekly basis. But now we'll just do it this way. And then finally, we have for I think 15 or 16 years collaborated with Villanova and with the AOPC on the Villanova Sentencing Workshop, and many of you, or at least the judges, have participated in that. It's just a great opportunity, almost like a little test bed on us thinking through commission policies and helping in judicial education and student education. And so so we'll continue to partner on that. Ryan and I will be working on that together with Professor Chanitson at Villanova. We're not quite sure what that looks like in the spring because it's held every spring, and it's usually on site at the Villanova Conference Center, the Inn at Villanova. We're not sure what's going to happen this coming spring, but we'll keep you in the loop, and we see that as an ongoing obligation. So those are our teaching responsibilities under the MOU. The next thing on the agenda was the Commonwealth Court case that Professor Mystic noted. So I'll just provide an opportunity if there's any other statement or any other comment about that by the professor.
There's nothing new to report at this time.
Great, thanks. And so now we're on to the action items, the fiscal issues. So the first action item deals with the financial audit. We have a financial audit done of every year of expenses, and we just closed out the 18-19 fiscal year and the audit for that. I want to thank Jadine for all of her work in working with the auditors to complete that. A copy of the audit was provided in the materials. I don't think there's any negative findings, which is a positive thing. There are some recommendations that came out of it, but I think the first action item is just the commission accepting or receiving, approving the financial audit as submitted.
All right. So is there a motion to approve the fiscal year?
I so move, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Street. Is there a second?
Second.
All right.
Michelle?
Thanks, Judge. All right, I'll try to make this a little easier. Are there any negative votes? All right, hearing none, the motion to approve the 18-19 financial audit passes.
Great, thank you. So the next issue is advertising, request for proposals for next year's audit, for the following year, which is 19-20 audit. One of the suggestions that came out of this audit was that it may be beneficial to think in terms of 3-year contracts because you might have more competition. And if an auditor has done all of the work of getting up to speed on the commission, they can then leverage that over the next 2 years in terms of familiarity with it. In the past, we had the same auditor for about a decade or more, and we know that they benefited from having that experience. The auditor we had this time was a new auditor, but raised that issue. So we'd like approval to send out a request for proposals for an auditor for the 19-20 financial audit, but we wanted to have the commission consider whether that should be framed as a 3-year contract instead of a single-year contract.
All right, is there a motion to approve the request for proposals, to approve the request to send out requests for proposals for a multi-year contract for the 19-20 financial audit?
I so move.
Sounds good. Senator Street, is there a second?
I second.
All right, Representative McClinton, I think I heard you coming through there.
Yes.
Just a quick question on this, Mark. I know one of the issues that we had with this auditing firm in the past has been, I think there was only one response to these. Is the thought that by going to a multi-year approach that we might encourage other firms to participate in our RFP process?
I think that's correct. I think that's one of the issues. And then the other is sort of, you're leveraging the investment of the first year over the second and third year because you now know sort of the work product. And maybe you can help to guide things to facilitate that too. So So we're thinking about a 3-year contract, if that makes sense to the commission.
Okay. All right. It's been moved and seconded to approve the RFP for a multi-year contract for fiscal year 1920 financial audit. Are there any negative votes? All right. Hearing none, the motion passes.
Great, thanks. And now we'll move into the operating budget. So we have information provided for the current fiscal year. As you recall, the commission adopted a 6-month budget based on 5 months of funding and the use of some of our reserves as necessary. If there's a benefit of COVID-19, it's that our operating expenses have been down. So I think we're within our budget, although Jadine has made a couple of adjustments to the budget. We've also tried to return any carryover from the previous year into our sort of reserve account so that we have that as needed for the future. So we ask for approval of the modifications to the fiscal 2021 operating budget, the 6-month budget.
All right. Is there a motion to approve the modifications to the fiscal year 2021 operating budget?
I so move.
All right. Senator Street, thank you. I appreciate that. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. DA Sunday, thank you so much. It's been moved and seconded to approve the modifications. Are there any questions? Okay. It's been moved and seconded to approve the modifications to the fiscal year 2021 operating budget. Are there any negative votes? All right. The motion carries.
All right, the next 3 action items deal with service purchase contracts, and these, I'll go through them very quickly. The first is with Maverick Strategies. This is a contract that was already approved in the past, but because of COVID and other things, really not much work was done. So it's in effect an extension of the previous contract. So that's the first one. The second one deals with Visual Research, a group that we worked with before to help with some of our education outreach functions, other things like that. And we see a real need for working with them in terms of rebuilding our sentencing, our website. We're collaborating with the college on a rebuild of our website and having sort of the visual graphics and other things like that addressed through this contract would be particularly helpful. So the Maverick contracts for $10,000, the visual research for $15,000. And then the third one deals with some assistance we may need in rebuilding or switching the online web application we have called SAS BI that Christy will talk about a little bit later. But these are the 3 service purchase contracts we're looking for formal approval of. And I think they could be done as a package.
Okay. So one, you think we can do them as one motion? All right. Is there a motion to approve the service purchase contract for Maverick Strategies of $10,000, Visual Research for $15,000, and Hio Hughes for $5,000?
I so move all 3.
All right. Is there a second?
Second.
Was that Judge Daly?
Judge Marsico?
Marsico.
Judge Marsico. All right. Sorry. All right. It's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions? All right. Are there any negative votes? All right. The motion passes.
Well, great. Thank you very much. I'll just remind you that at the December meeting, we will hopefully have some indication of what the budget looks like for the second half of the year. So we will have both a proposal for a second 6-month budget, and then also any kind of information for a budget request for the next fiscal year. So coming attractions. With that, I'll turn it to Matt to give a report on his work.
Great, thanks, Mark. I want to provide a brief update on some developments with our partnership with Penn State University and the Criminal Justice Research Center. The Criminal Justice Research Center has recently hired a new assistant director, Professor Megan Kurlichek. Megan is joining Penn State from the University of Albany. She received her PhD from Penn State University and in fact was an intern with the Sentencing Commission. So this is a really valuable opportunity for us to connect or rethink some of our relationship and our partnership with the Justice Center, especially with somebody who knows the work of the commission. Been in conversations with her about recruitment of graduate students, how we go about recruiting postdoc students, what sort of projects we've historically funded through seed grants through the MOU that we have, what kind of research we're working on, and ways that we might be able to collaborate with her as an academic, but also some of the additional resources in the department at Penn State, be it professors or graduate students or additional postdocs. This fall, we have 2 graduate students working with us underneath this MOU. Emerson Waite is a second-year PhD student who will be joining us for the first time this fall, and Jordan Zvankovic, who's back for his 4th or 5th year with the commission as a graduate assistant. We also have 1 postdoc, Miranda Galvin, who you saw this morning speaking about the Substance Abuse and Probation Project. And this fall, we're going to be working with the department and Eric Milzik, our Research and Data Analysis Unit Manager, on hiring some undergraduate interns as well for the fall. One of the important topics that was discussed with Megan, but also in a review that Mark and I had with Professor Eric Baumer, who's the chair of the Criminology and Sociology Department, and Derek Krieger, who's the director of the Criminal Justice Research Center. We had a meeting to review our MOU and ways that we're continuing to partner and work together. And one of the ideas was to be thinking about a postdoctoral scholar for the following year. So for 2021, posting a position during this academic job cycle for a postdoc scholar in race and ethnic disparity in sentencing. So somebody who's a new PhD who investigates issues of race and ethnicity as they relate to the calculation of the prior record score, pretrial activities, sentencing, resentencing commitment, and parole decisions. That job posting can be found in page 35 of your materials. And the listing, working again with HR, includes a sentence of preference given to candidates that advance staff diversity. So I think this falls squarely under the diversity, equity, and inclusion materials that Mark was discussing. This is be a very unique year for candidates for the postdoc because we believe that the academic job market will be very challenging and difficult with few universities hiring new professors. So there will be an opportunity for us to get a lot of applications from very qualified individuals in this area. So we're excited about that. On page 36 of the materials, you'll also see a overview of a grant submission that we agreed to partner with some professors who are an interdisciplinary team of investigators from the Penn State College of Information Science and Technology and the Rock Ethics Institute. This group, who really has an understanding, a high understanding of mathematics and computers, is proposing to study the issues of fairness as it revolves around algorithms. While they're not strictly focused solely on the criminal justice system, clearly that is an important area that their investigation will cover. So our partnership with them is to lend our expertise in as it relates to issues of the criminal justice system and our experience with risk assessment. But we also thought that this would be a great opportunity for this study, if it's funded, to present their findings to the commission and to other agencies across the Commonwealth, as well as across the country, be it the National Association of Sentencing Commissions or other agencies. Clearly, the idea of risk and needs assessment, I don't need to tell members of the commission that it's a important and hot and controversial topic. So any better understanding of how well these tools do in promoting or ensuring fairness in the selection criteria, I think is a welcome addition. A couple other initiatives that are going on. Later today, we'll be talking about the second part of our evaluation of the SIP program. One of the reasons for our delay related to that program was the way that the commission currently receives information from the Pennsylvania State Police. We have to request the rap sheets in small batches when we're thinking or considering issues of recidivism. And then the way we receive this is quite antiquated in a text file as opposed to a data file that's easy for us to utilize. So Eric Milzik, the head of the Research and Data Analysis Unit, and myself have been talking with PSP about ways that we can improve the way that we request and receive data. And I think this will be a tremendous leap forward. We spent weeks, maybe even months, translating the information we received from them from the SIP project. And this information may be the backbone of some of the analyses we do related to the 8th edition guidelines, especially for prior record score, the elements that go into that, as well as thinking about issues of lapsing and recidivism and so forth. So we're hoping to smooth out that process. As Mark mentioned, we're also working closely with Neil Cotter and the Visual Research Group on redesigning some aspects of our website. Myself, Mark, and Christy Bundro from our Applications and Information Technology Unit have been discussing and thinking about how to divide our website into more contemporaneous information and more historical information through some archival properties to make that site more user-friendly and approachable. And as Mark alluded, the timing of this is related to an upgrade of the servers and the platform used for websites in the liberal arts at Penn State University, their IT group. So we're working with Neil closely on thinking of some strategies for redesigning that website to support also some of the things that Ryan will be talking about from the education and outreach, ways that we can provide information to key stakeholders, but really streamline that and make our information accessible to folks who are coming to our webpage. And finally, I just talk about two other issues related to external partnership. I want to thank Diane Shoup at the Commission, who recently finished a 6-year, 2 terms with the National Association of the Sentencing Commissions as secretary. She just stepped down from the executive board as an attempt to keep some continuity with the commission and the national group and the other states with sentencing commissions. I was nominated and elected to be on the executive board. Currently, I do not have an officer position, but I'll be serving a 3-year term, working closely with other sentencing commissions and finding out how folks are dealing with issues from data to policies and practices. And finally, Mark and I have been engaged with a number of conversations with the Council of State Government related to some of the Act 115 work. There are some desire to create or develop a sentencing reporting tool, or if you would imagine a dashboard that looks at different types of sentencing alternatives for each of the grid cells and how effective they are in preventing recidivism. So if we were to look at OGS 3, prior record score 2, what types of sentences are given? And for those individuals who are in those cells, what type of, what's their recidivism rate related to different types of sentences? I think that this builds upon some of the work that's about a decade old, referred to as the Smart Sentencing Initiative that may have been used in Multnomah County, Oregon. And so Mark and I have been talking with them. We might do some preliminary work on that, but we think that this will also be something that will be helpful as we move to the 8th edition of the guidelines, rather than investing a lot of time and energy currently on the 7th edition, when we most likely will be moving to a new framework that has more OGS categories and a refined prior record score. So I'll turn it back to Mark or the chairman, and thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. And I'll throw in a final issue because it's actually a matter for the chair. And that is that we've also been discussing establishing or asking the chair to establish what we're calling an academic review panel, because we're all sort of set towards really launching this 8th edition guideline effort in the new year. We've spent years building it, and now we need to have to convert it into guidelines that we can take out to public hearings. And as a last part of this process, to make sure that we're on track and looking at the right things, we thought it would be helpful to have an external review group, maybe 10 or 12 individuals, academics, work with us to just do a review of what we've done, what we're proposing, and anything they think we should be doing differently or adding to the mix or getting rid of. And it would be a short-term project over the course of 2 or 3 months between now and December to have this sort of high-level review of what we've done as a launching pad to go into the 8th edition guidelines. And we see this as an opportunity not only to get people that are like subject matter experts in either sentencing or guidelines or Pennsylvania guidelines, but also to address issues of race and disparity and other things like that. So, one of the opportunities we see is, impanel this group that we have people both from Pennsylvania, some of the schools in Pennsylvania, including the historically Black colleges and universities, and external experts, and bring them together for, a review of this process. And look, we're going to be asking a lot of them, in a short period of time to really sort of dive into this with us and give us their impressions or their thoughts. But anyhow, we think it's a worthwhile thing to do before we really launch into the 8th edition work in the new year. So I've talked to the chairman about this, and I'm going to turn it back to him because he can certainly, approve any committee he'd like to, I guess. And but the other thing that I mentioned to him, and I know it's I'm not sure if it's in the cards or not, but oftentimes with those types of panels, because these are busy people you're bringing away from their work to do something, there's talk of an honorarium that's paid. And one of the things I threw in as a suggestion was, if we're going to impanel this kind of ad hoc group, that we think in terms of some kind of honorarium that we could offer. They could decline it, but that we could offer for their participation. But with that, I'll turn it back to the chair. And I think we're done with this section of the meeting.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Mark. I would actually like to hear from some of the commission members if they have any thoughts or feelings on this. I mean, my idea was for us to just sort of broaden the group of folks that are taking a look at these, these issues and initiatives and providing us some feedback. And I wanted to make sure that, again, consistent with our conversations at the last meeting and what we've heard earlier today, that this was a diverse group and, was certainly, subject matter experts from the world of academia. And again, reflecting the diversity of the Commonwealth and those affected most directly by the criminal justice system, so that we could really get, another set of eyes, I guess, for some feedback and some input on some of our initiatives. So, I've been kicking around the idea. I spoke to Mark about it several times, and he had mentioned, I guess in the past, there was an ad hoc committee that had been formed for somewhat similar purposes. And so, we kind of we're kicking that around. I didn't know if any members, I do have some hesitations on the honorarium, given the current state of the Commonwealth's finances, and Mark knows my frugal nature on these types of things. So we were going back and forth on that. I just think it might be tough, particularly in advance of November, with all the difficult budget decisions we're going to be facing then to, without knowing the certainty of our future funding, whether we're going to have the ability to do that or not. So we may need these folks to be, such passionate subject matter experts that they're willing to give of their time and energy and commitment, for the greater good and the benefits of sentencing policy here in the Commonwealth. But overall, on the concept of creating an ad hoc committee, including the historically Black colleges and other subject matter experts from academia here, any thoughts on that from any commission members? All right. Does anyone see any problems with it? I guess maybe that's the best way to put it. Does anyone have any issues or concerns about having another committee made up of folks from the academic world who are focused on these issues? Take a look at our work and offer some. Go ahead.
I think someone else is weighing in, so I'll wait until they're done. Is someone else weighing in?
I don't think so. Go ahead.
Okay, so the only, I just wonder what it looks like, because I think the concept is spectacular, but as I continue to remain on this commission and I continue to learn, it's, there's so much information. So I guess just my question is, how do you very quickly bring this group up to speed at kind of what they're looking at, what the parameters are? I know I jumped into a committee late in the process, and of course I started asking questions because it was new to me. I think Ryan was on that committee, and you know, I know everybody's thinking, we already talked about all this. So how do you, in such a short period of time, direct it? And probably, I'm assuming the executive director has considered that, but that would be my only curiosity, is how do we focus them in on what the issues are, bring them up to speed, and get this all done in such a short period of time?
Yeah, thanks, Judge. I think, you know, we first have to keep it at a high level and fairly conceptual. One of the reasons for having subject matter experts at the table is that they have an ability to do a deeper dive on some of those issues and highlight what they see as concerns or problems, where other people that are looking more at the, you know, what's the approach you're taking or whatever, might bring different sort of disciplines or different views to that we're not even thinking about. And I think that's an important issue, especially on the race, ethnicity, gender side, because, you know, that's an important issue that having people that focus their academic research in that area might have views around what we're doing or how we're doing it that are impactful. I mean, you know, even in public hearings, we hear, you know, specific things that I think are really informative. And I think that's the idea with this process as well. But it is fairly high level because the commission is going to be working through all the details of this, but it's just more conceptually, are we on the right track? Are we hitting the right issues?
I think too, Judge, it's probably on us to tailor our response to their findings, their recommendations, rather than have them worry about, you know, our details. I think that's the benefit of having them have fresh eyes and a fresh look. So they don't come in with any baked in bias or prejudice on how we do things. They're going to tell us what they think works. So I think it's a great idea. It's more than timely. I think it's timeless. I think we should be doing this routinely.
Yeah, I agree with the professor as well. The experts compared to us are already in the deeper dive zone, and they could take us deeper with them and explain the things that we don't thoroughly understand that we could implement. So yes, I agree.
Yeah.
Right. And I love the idea. And I'm sure, well, there are people that pop into my head. I'm sure, Mark, you probably have a list of people who would be very good for it. I think it's a wonderful idea. Anyone else?
All right. Well, if nobody else has any feedback, I'll work with Mark and we'll get moving on that and try to put something together. So I appreciate the feedback from the commission, and we'll certainly keep everyone informed as to, you know, where we are on that initiative. Judge, did you have something else to add? Judge Bernstein?
Do we need any kind of a motion to make that go forward, or are we good without that?
So I think, Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, we would need a motion if we're going to have to adjust our budget to include the honorarium. You know, my recommendation would be to hold off on that for right now. Maybe at the December meeting, you know, we can, if that becomes an issue, maybe we can take that up then. Mark, I don't know if you have any thoughts about that.
Yeah, look, I'm happy. I appreciate how tight funds are, so I'm very happy to try to do this without that honorarium. It's just that, as Professor Rago and others might know that, some of these things, it's sort of the expectation in some circles. And look, I think people within the state more than likely would do it without expecting that. It's when you start involving outside experts that sometimes there's an expectation. So, but I think it's worth pursuing without that and seeing how we do. And if we run into a roadblock, I'll come back to you.
All right. I mean, that's fair. And I do understand it, particularly for out-of-state folks. The one thing that some of the universities that Mark had listed as potential candidates for inclusion are universities that already get substantial resources from the Commonwealth. And I get it that that's not the individual professor, but, I'm just a little bit mindful of, how that will look. And in addition, how our finances are going to be come November. I mean, we don't have a budget past November at this point. So I would like to maybe just hold off on that until we have a little bit better sense of what we're looking at financially for the remainder of this fiscal year.
Sounds good.
All right.
Thank you.
All right,
Chairman,
so
I think we're ready to move on to the next section, which is applications and information technology, and Christy Bundro.
Thank you, Mark and Chairman Stevens, and good morning, or actually good afternoon, everyone. I'll start with a couple of staff updates for the applications and IT unit. As Mark mentioned earlier, all of our support contracts with external consultants ended at the end of June. So all of the SGS web support and development is being performed by our in-house team. We hired our first IT intern. His name is David Rawana, and he started with us last week. David's a senior at Penn State and is working toward a degree in security and risk analysis in the College of Information Sciences and Technology. He's going to be assisting us with some of the upcoming development work in SGS Web, and we're also going to have him research some technology options for the future rebuild of SGS Web. We're happy to have him on board so he can help us with our workload, but we're also happy to be able to provide him with kind of a valuable work experience as an extension of our partnership with Penn State. Speaking of our partnership with Penn State, in July, we moved the SGS Web development and training environments from being hosted by Rackspace Technology to Penn State's virtual hosting platform. By leveraging this Penn State resource, we were able to reduce the support cost for these environments by over $15,000 a year. As I reported in the June Commission meeting, we deployed modifications to support JRI 2, Act 115. So I just wanted to update on that a little bit. In July, we did have to deploy a subsequent update related to those changes to fix a few minor bugs, correct some labeling related to county IP and probation with restrictive conditions. And also we made a few changes to improve the overall user experience. We currently have two pretty large SGS Web development efforts underway. The first is the resentencing guidelines module. So this module, as I described in the past, allows users to produce resentencing guidelines prior to the revocation resentencing hearing that are based on the type of probation violation. We are currently in the testing and bug fixing phase. Members of the education and outreach unit have been assisting us by performing acceptance testing to ensure that the module is functioning properly and that it aligns with the legislative requirements. If all goes to plan, then the changes for the resentencing guidelines will go live on Thursday, September 24th. We are already planning for phase 2 of the resentencing guidelines module. There were a few items that kind of came up during development that we decided to hold off on just in the interest of getting the primary functionality into production. And by doing a phase 2, we may also be able to address a few of the items that Dr. Alvin mentioned in her presentation. The other major SGS Web effort underway is sentence risk assessment. Development work for this project is nearing completion, and we expect to start testing very soon. We were targeting the end of September for go live, but at this point, mid-October is probably more realistic. So more to come on that. Once we finish these two projects, we have plenty of work in our queue. One of the projects that we've started discussing recently is the potential replacement of SAS BI. So SAS BI is the business intelligence tool that powers the data portal that's on the Commission's website. Just if you want to follow along, starting on page 42 in the supplemental materials, there's a project proposal document that provides kind of a high-level overview of this project. And I'm going to do a quick demo here of the SAS BI tool so that Commission members can kind of see the functionality we have today. So I'm going to take over screen sharing. And I think I should just be able to. All right, are you able to see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, so this is the Commission's website. So just as a side note, Dr. Kleiman was talking about redesigning this. So this is what he's talking about, redesigning. So SAS BI right now, if you're on our website and you click Access Data Online, that takes us to this data portal. And this is accessible by, anybody in the public, Commission members, whoever comes to our website will be able to, can go to this data site. We have two types of reports. So we have sentencing reports and judge reports, which pretty self-explanatory, I think. So this page kind of explains the reports that are available and the type of data that they provide. So I'll just go into the sentencing reports. And again, there's several different reports that you can run from here. I'm going to choose the type of sentence report by title section. Maybe. So when a user comes here, then they would pick the sentencing year that they're interested in looking at. We will be working with HIO to load the 2019 data. So at this point, we only have 2018 data. Is the latest data we have. The user would also choose the unit of analysis, the county that they're interested in looking at, or you can choose statewide. The offense title that they're interested in, which then brings up a list of, the available sections. And I'm going to pick the one that Mark recommended, 2701. So you can also pick, I think, multiple sections in here if you want to see data for more than one. Run. If you guys can see that, but then the report is broken out by the guideline edition. So 7th edition versus editions prior. It shows the different offense descriptions, the grades, the OGSs, and then it breaks down the sentencing for those offenses, such as, the total number of state prison sentences, the average min and max associated to those state prison sentences, county jail, CIP, probation, and so forth. So that is what is available today on SAS BI. I'm going to stop sharing. Does anybody have any questions about that before I move on? Okay. Go back. So basically that's what we have today, and there's a few reasons why we're considering replacing it. One of the main drivers is a few years ago, 2 years ago, almost exactly, we contracted with SAS Professional Services to upgrade the SAS BI environment. And since then, there's been a technical issue that prevents us from being able to create new reports and makes it very difficult to update the existing reports. Commission staff and the SAS technical support team, and even some of Penn State's IT resources have invested a lot of time in trying to resolve the issue, but we just haven't haven't been able to figure it out. In our recent conversations with SAS, they actually encouraged us to move to their newer BI application, which is called Visual Analytics. They're still supporting the SAS BI platform that we're using, but they said they're pretty much no longer really developing new features for it, and it'll, eventually become obsolete. Last week, SAS gave us a demo of their new Visual Analytics platform, and it was impressive. It offers features that aren't available on the current SAS BI platform, such as interactive dashboards, rich kind of data visualizations, the ability to add filters for various dimensions and layers, to be able to create more granular reports and to create ad hoc reports. There are some benefits to continuing our relationship with SAS. The migration to the new platform may be easier since we're moving from one SAS product to another. So we may be able to copy over some of our existing reports. So we definitely want to evaluate this, the SAS Visual Analytics product as we investigate our options. However, I did want to mention that the other business intelligence platform that we would strongly consider is Microsoft Power BI. So this tool has very similar functionality to the SAS tool, and it's another area where we'd be able to leverage our partnership with Penn State. As Penn State employees, we already have Power BI licenses, so the licensing cost would be minimal. However, it would be a more complex project since we would have to kind of completely recreate the existing reports on Power BI. I'm going to turn it over to Mark. I know you're ready to interject. He has some additional information to share, and then you can also talk about the action item that was related to this discussion.
Sure. First, thanks very much for that, Christy, and great demo. As you can see, that's a really great resource to have available, sort of on-the-fly reports by year and by a lot of different metrics. And so people use that. I use that a lot. A lot of people use that. We use it for providing information to the General Assembly and to courts. So very important function. And the question is, how do we maintain that functionality and even build on it to have more visual graphics, things like that. As Christy mentioned, about 2 years ago, more than 2 years ago, we started a process of working with SAS to try to fix some problems with the current application. And back then, the commission agreed to commit what ended up being a contract for about $20,000 to go through all of the work of rebuilding that effort. And to date, we don't have a fix. So we've committed a lot of time, and we at least encumbered the resources to pay for that. But we haven't paid anything yet because we don't have a product that works the way it should. And so in an effort to try to resolve that, to try to just have something that works and will help us moving forward, we sort of have two options. One is that we move with the same family of products. And if we were to do that, we can basically apply that encumbrance that was committed to for the old work to a new contract, to the new effort. So they just apply our outstanding bill to the cost of the new application. So at least we're getting the benefit that we wanted in a new effort. But as Christy said, moving forward, maybe that's not the right platform for us because it's not something that we have staff that normally works with that kind of stuff. And then the other option is to go with a product, a platform that is really inexpensive to us and well supported by Penn State. But it would not only take a lot of effort to build that because it'd be, it'd be a new platform, but also we'd still have to decide how we're going to resolve this outstanding bill from all of this work and effort the last 2 years. And so I don't know that we need a decision today from the commission, but we wanted to put this before the commission saying sort of those are the two pathways. We want some kind of product out there, and we still need to do some more work on deciding which path makes the most sense. And maybe involving, discussions to figure out how do we resolve this old bill too. So there's a lot of things in play. But what we'd like approval for is to allow Christy and others to continue to investigate this and then provide the findings to the chair and allow the chair to take action consistent with what the membership agrees to. So if the membership agrees to approve us moving forward, then we'll continue the work, we'll give it to the chair and let the chair make the decision on which, on whether to support what we're recommending or not. If necessary, we can bring it back to the December meeting, but we'd like to get moving on this because, we need this kind of capacity or capability out there. So Christy, back to you with any other thoughts, and then we can turn it to the chair for any action that maybe needs to be taken.
I don't have anything else on this.
So then, Mark, you would need a motion to authorize the development to acquire, develop, and deploy this new business intelligence platform so that we can continue to distribute the data publicly that we've got.
That's correct. And we'd have to, I think we'd want to provide to you sort of the findings of our research of which of these two options make sense, because it's going to cost some money either way. But the question is, what's the final bottom line look like, and what's the best platform moving forward? And so we don't have the information now, but if we can pull that together during the next month, we'd like to be able to bring it to you and say, we're recommending option one and move forward with it instead of waiting until the December meeting.
And you're comfortable with that, given even my frugal nature of holding up on the $1,000 honorarium? I'm impressed.
It's always proven to work out okay in the end. So yeah.
All right. So are there any thoughts or any conversation about this from any commission members? All right. Well, then so when I see Judge Bernstein lean forward, I think she's going to like unmute, and that makes me think she's got something to say. So, not having heard any, is there a motion to authorize the acquiring and development and deployment of new business intelligence platform for the online preparation of sentencing reports and information upon approval of the chair, as laid out by Mark and Christy in their description here?
So moved.
All right. So, Judge Bernstein, Judge Tucker. I'm in trouble with one judge either way here, right?
Give Tucker give him the.
I'll yield to Judge Bernstein.
All right. Judge Bernstein makes the motion. Judge Tucker seconds. Are there any negative votes? All right. The motion passes. All right. So, Mark.
Christy, anything else to wrap up?
Just to wrap up, I won't go into details of any of our other projects, but if you look on pages 40 and 41 of the supplemental materials, you'll kind of see the IT projects that we're going to have that we have out there, and there's a brief description of each. And then also in the supplemental materials, as always, is the sentences submitted report, and that starts on page 44. So that shows the sentences submitted in SGS Web by county and year. Just a note, as of July 30th, we had 129,000 sentences that had been submitted with 2019 dates of sentence and almost 40,000 with 2020 dates of sentence. So, and that's all I have, unless anyone has any questions for me.
Questions for Christy? I do want to follow up. I know, earlier Mark mentioned it. I mean, the staff overall did a terrific job with those hearings. I know it was very difficult doing these remote locations and then adding the Department of Corrections. Christy, I know you were sort of the point person there for sort of, you were like air traffic control with the different correctional institutions and everything else like that. So thank you for all your work there. And to the entire team at the commission. I mean, everybody did a great job, but Christy, I wanted to especially thank you for your work with that, those challenges for sure.
Thank you.
All right, what's
Next
Yeah.
is research and data analysis with Eric.
All right. Thanks very much. If you'd like, you can turn to page 64 of the supplemental materials to find the start of the research commentary. But you can also jump to page 71 because we're going to start talking about the state intermediate punishment evaluation. So commission staff have completed the 2020 SIP Part 2 report. This report is the final report that the commission will produce because of changes to the way the program is structured and evaluated from Act 115 of 2019. So the program is now being reorganized as the State Drug Treatment Program, and this is now under the DOC. So future evaluations will be conducted purely by the DOC. So because this is our last evaluation, I'd like to take this chance a little bit to kind of give a high-level overview of not only the findings, but also some of the ways that we've performed the analyses and the sampling on this evaluation. So we had previously submitted part 1 of the evaluation, and that covered the number of offenders that were evaluated for SIP, number of offenders sentenced to SIP, number of offenders sentenced to state prison that were eligible for enrollment, and the number of offenders that successfully completed the program. So the focus of this part 2 report is going to be the multivariate analyses that show the 6-month, 1-year, 3-year, and 5-year recidivism rates for offenders in the program versus those who were either eligible but not sentenced or expelled from the program. And then we give some recommendations for possible improvements to the program itself. So the sample of this program is the basis of how we can show whether it works or not. So we took all of the eligible offenders who were sentenced to SIP, and based on criteria of sentenced to the DOC between 18th of May in 2005 and 18th of May of 2019 for an eligible offense. They had to have received a sentence of at least 24 months or greater, and they had to have a TCU score of 3 or greater. So then what we did was we basically created three main categories that we compare between them. We had offenders who were sentenced to SIP and completed successfully, offenders who were sentenced to SIP but were expelled from the program, and then those who were eligible for the program but were not sentenced. So once we got through our criteria and attrition, we had 5,212 participants, and we matched those with the same number of offenders who were eligible but not sentenced to the program. So that's the way we basically use our propensity score matching, which is matching an offender who was sent to the program versus one who was eligible but not sent. So we can see the independent effect that the program really had on recidivism rates. One of the analyses that we also conducted was based on determining the likelihood of successful completion of the SIP program. So using some of the same correlative factors that we use for recidivism, we look at substance abuse, legal and extra legal factors to see which variables influence your successful completion of the program. And like I said, we also looked at the recidivism rates, which is our main outcome measure. So we did look at 6 months, 1 year, 3 years, and 5 years of offenders who completed or expelled from and eligible for the SIP program. Now, with all of this, we have a follow-up time of about 3 years. So we make sure that we have sufficient time after they were released to determine their recidivism. So Those who were sent to SIP, their follow-up time starts at either their release from prison if they were expelled or their successful completion period. Those who were not sentenced to SIP, but instead went to DOC, we use their release time to use that follow-up period. Now, overall, this evaluation, like the prior ones, find that the SIP program is effective. Offenders who complete the SIP were significantly less likely to recidivate than both eligible offenders who entered the program and were expelled, but also those who were not sent to the program and instead sentenced to DOC. So overall, we found that those who completed the program were 29% less likely than those sent to prison to recidivate after 3 years. So again, this is our last evaluation. And that means that it's restructured as a state drug treatment program. So we like to encourage the DOC and future evaluations to really keep track of the different groups in the program, the different ways that that the population could change. The criteria for the program, or rather, the way that offenders enter the program is obviously changed now that it's no longer necessarily a sentencing alternative and instead a DOC program. So identifying these groups and how the groups may change in this new structure is going to be very important moving forward, as well as looking at the utilization rates. So if we look currently, roughly 20% of eligible offenders are sentenced to SIP. So we should, in future evaluations, definitely keep track of usage rates and intergroup usage rates as well, to make sure that not only the recidivism rate, but the successful completion is looked at a group by group basis, to make sure that all demographic groups and the like are meeting their programmatic needs in the program. Moving on to vital strategies, and that is on page 90 of the supplemental materials. Matt and Miranda did a great job covering that, so I won't go into it in too much depth, other than to say it's focused on, obviously, the impact of community supervision and substance-involved individuals. And again, going over those three main data sources, which would be the commission's resentencing information in the data there, the review of the probation cases from the 3 jurisdictions, and the interviews with the key stakeholders from Center Counties and Allegheny. If you turn to page 207, you'll find some information on the summary of our projections models. So we've had significant progress on our PCCD projection grant. And that is our project that we're using to try and forecast correction populations between 3 and 5 years in the future. It's based on a set of 4 different modules, looking at early forecasts of sentences, impact of sentencing guidelines on revisions, parole guidelines and recommitment ranges, and then probation guidelines. This grant was extended back in June to the end of the year, December 31st, 2020. Since the June meeting, we have completed initial simulation models for modules 1, 2, and 3. Module 3 had basically completed the modeling of the parole system and all of the mechanisms there. Module 1 in particular had a lot of work done on the interface and how we interact with the model. So we have had 20 one-hour consultation sessions with Simulate, which has helped us develop a new interface mechanism that basically allows us to change the parameters of the model. So that can be changing the rates of various case types, changing the overall intake rates, or and depending on the module, changing the OGS and PRS basis for a lot of the different case types to try and project how that would occur in the future. So module 1, which is the simplest model, this is the start for this. And we were able to really change the way that the interface works. And instead of having to go deep into the code, we're able to, in a much more simple manner, change some of these parameters. And that helps us respond to faster reports and legislative requests. We've also continued work on the parole project. So this is based on the recommendation for granting or refusal of parole based on a combination of the inmate's risk and preparedness scores. We did get, at the June 2020 commission meeting, the proposed guidelines were adopted by the commission, and then they were published in the Pennsylvania Bulletin in July 2020. We just had 2 public hearings, one just the other day, September 9th, and the other earlier, August 31st. As Mark mentioned, we're still working with the parole board to further refine the risk tool. In particular, when we have the risk tool finalized, we can readjust the cutoff scores for the risk axis and then be able to finish the matrix on there. And we have also spoken with Michael Sullivan, who's the DCA from Allegheny County, on the pretrial domestic violence risk tool. And we're continuing to consider implementation and validation of that tool as we move forward. On the data management side, we've had quite a bit of progress. So we've talked a little bit about updating the resentencing database. Basically, this was a database that parallels our sentencing database that contains obviously our resentencing information, but this has been lapsed for roughly 18 months. With the help largely of Yen Shi, we've been able to go back and update nearly 18 months worth of data. This is now turned into a monthly update. So along with our monthly data cleaning process, we have added the resentencing data cleaning process. And we've also begun steps to automate this further to try and make it faster and to increase the speed and the accuracy that we're cleaning our data. So we're also continuing to work with applications in IT and the education and outreach units, excuse me, to update our code book with the 8th edition changes and with SGS Web statutory updates. We're always keeping our code book and our data updated. Matt mentioned we have contacted the PSP, excuse me, and we've updated our process through which we get data from them, and this is through their FTP servers. So we've already made this change, which is, as Matt said, instead of kind of getting slower batched files, we're trying to get it set up that we can now access significantly more data, significantly faster. And we're in process of getting, instead of those text files, and actual data files, so we'll be able to work with better. One of the issues with these text files is there's not a data type that comes along with it. So that can lead to not only slower data requests themselves, but also potentially more inaccurate data since there's problems sometimes with the conversion. As Mark said, we've also been working on some reports that include an analysis of how the sentencing data has changed due to the COVID crisis. So we've been trying to make an accurate comparison of 2019 versus 2020 on a monthly basis, which we've been doing a different approach that we typically have been in order to adjust for issues like backfilling data. So we've been creating reports and databases that are more consistent in our data to see some of those changes and effects.
Hey, Eric, we gotta keep moving along. So
Sure.
can you do a quick wrap on the research partnerships, and then we'll move on.
Absolutely. So we've still been providing data set requests to researchers. We've still been providing data through our SASBI web portal. We are continuing to receive the support of a postdoctoral scholar. We have Kai Alphas has recently completed his summer internship with us, and we're receiving the continued support from Jordan, who is a graduate student here, as well as Emerson Waite, who has recently begun a graduate assistantship with us as well. As mentioned before, Yen Shi was promoted to a full-time position. She's done a lot of work with us on the data management side of things, and is primarily responsible for the updating of the resentencing database as well. So thanks for your time, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Hey, great. Eric, we have 2 action items though. Let's make sure we get to those. So the first action item is approval of the state intermediate punishment report part 2 for submission to the General Assembly. So I'll turn it to the chair for that action item.
Okay, so yeah, it's funny. I actually thought we already received it, but I guess I received it in my capacity as a commission member, not in my capacity at the legislature. Anyway, is there a motion to approve the state intermediate punishment report for submission to the legislature?
So moved.
Is that Judge Marsico?
Yes.
All right.
Second.
Seconded by DA Sunday. All right. Are there any negative votes? All right. That motion is approved.
And next is the Vital Strategies report, approval to submit that to Vital Strategies.
All right. Is there a motion to approve the role of substance use report for submission to Vital Strategies?
I'll move.
All right. Judge Bernstein.
Second.
Seconded by Judge Dally. Are there any negative votes? Motion's approved. Moving on to tab 6.
And Ryan.
Thank you. So I'll be brief considering the time and the decisions that you all need to vote on. And as Mark mentioned earlier, the Education Outreach Unit has been busy, and there's really 4 of the highlighted topics on the screen that I just want to cover briefly with you. Just to reference you, if you're looking at the commission notebook, the highlights are on page 27 through 30. And if you're referencing the supplemental materials, the education outreach information is from page 212 through 279. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was the 2020 county meetings, and just give you a brief summary. I know commission members have heard me talk at great length about this, starting really in March and again in June. So we've officially wrapped up the tour, as we have affectionately called it, although there are a few counties that want an encore from us. So it's been well received at this point. What I'll show you here on the screen is just a representation of the counties that we have met with. And to date, we've met with 54 counties, actually 55 counties now since we're in September. And it represents about 83% of the judicial districts. And I think another point that's worth making for all members here is just to note that through this, we've reached, I'd say at a minimum, but over 1,200 individuals. And the reason I can't give you a specific number And as Mark had noted, much of this has gone virtual. And so we don't always know how many individuals are sitting on the other side of the screen. So, having met now with 50 plus counties, I envision that we're well over 1,200 individuals. And I think that's a really important part of the work that we do, and builds off some comments that our Vice Chair, Judge Bernstein, had mentioned during public hearings and getting education out to practitioners. So I think this has been a really important effort. What I'll say, just wrapping up a little bit on the county meeting side, is just a reminder that the commission directed us as staff to engage in an education and outreach effort starting, the direction came from the September 2019 meeting. And so now we're a year later, and I'm proud of the work that we've done in the unit, and particularly proud for the relationships that we're building with the counties. And I will connect a few of these topics together and leading into Mark's discussion about full reporting and certification of compliance, and just how important this engagement has been, not only in the communication of activities of the commission, but also with establishing our unit and closer relationships with counties as we have to engage in ever increasing roles here at the commission. So the next thing that I wanted to point to, and coming back to the highlights here, is the annual reporting and verification of 2019 sentences. And this is really a team effort across all units within the commission. Clearly, I'm with the Education Outreach Unit, so I'll talk a little bit about our efforts. And what I'd like to note here is that we had 421 notices sent out to individual judges, president judges and criminal court judges. And we provided, on the criminal court side, individual information to each judge, really covering two categories of what we indicated as information that wasn't reported to the commission. So you could look at that as a sentence that was not reported at all, so quote unquote missing, or sentences that were in SGS Web and in effect just had not been submitted. And so those are really the two categories. And staff of the unit did a great job in connecting with individual judges, practitioners in counties who are responsible for entering and submitting sentences for the court. And we saw quite the increase in number of sentences reported in August alone out of this effort, looking at 2019 sentences. And so this is sort of that second topic that I'll tie together with the third in a few moments, to say this effort this year goes a long way in highlighting to counties areas in which maybe their processes have failed in full submission of information, an opportunity for us as staff to provide education to counties on what information needs to be submitted. There were counties that weren't submitting sentences that otherwise should have been because they didn't think they needed to. And also an opportunity for us to provide assistance to counties as far as finding the requisite information necessary to submit sentences in SGS Web. And again, if you reference the supplemental materials in the commentary, I've provided a detailed report of other areas in which we've seen reasons for maybe underreporting or not fully reporting sentences. So again, that was a really important effort as we continue to build relationships with the counties and try to support full submission of data across Pennsylvania. So taking a break from the heavy stuff for a second, this is something Mark had mentioned earlier on, and just an opportunity for you to see on the screen some of the work that the unit has done in conjunction with other units as well, on just communicating the work of the commission, the mandates of the commission, the activities of the commission. On the left-hand side of the screen, it's a screenshot of the commission's YouTube channel, really born out of this time and having some of our first videos released, I believe, back in April and May. And we have a number of videos at this point released, and to just communicating to the general public as well as practitioners across the state, and provides more opportunities for us to meet individuals. And we're probably getting close to 450 views on our videos. I'm not going viral yet, but hold out hope here for the end of 2020. On the right-hand side of the screen, what you'll see is something Mark had mentioned, and it's a snippet of a monthly update that we're providing to select individuals across the state, the courts, DAs, PDs, and so forth, in a mass emailing. And this is just the first part of it, but we try to highlight about 3 really timely and important topics each month and distribute that to practitioners across the state. We also post this information on our website in a PDF form so that if they're not receiving it in an email, they can be referencing this on our website. So a lot of really good information there and hopefully timely in the communication of the commission's work. The last thing that I'll cover in any detail, I'll turn it over to our chair and Mark if they want me to elaborate on anything, is under the other key education and outreach activities, specifically in your supplemental information, pages 215 and 216, where I discuss a collaboration with PCCD, so the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency. This year, the Education Outreach Unit has engaged with staff of PCCD to review intermediate punishment or county intermediate punishment grants. And that's an important part of the process, again, getting to full submission of data and certification of compliance. Because what we've seen in our work with counties and the changes from JRI 2 is, we have an opportunity now to promote consistent use of language when it comes to sentencing, and also building off of the relationships from the county meetings and the annual reporting, really promoting the importance of fully submitting information to the commission. Certainly much of the discussion today has been about the importance of data and what we can do with it. And so we see part of our role as a unit within the commission to work with counties to promote best practices there. So look, that's a lot of information in a short period of time, but I wanted to highlight those 4 things. Again, the county meetings, the annual reporting, and the IP grants really go well together as we continue to move forward to look at full submission and certification of compliance. And for the rest of the information, there's highlights provided in the notebook, and there's additional information provided in the supplemental materials. So I'll turn it back to the chair.
All right, thanks, Ryan, and thanks for moving us along. Thanks again for all your work. I know that a lot of your activities were really complicated as a result of COVID, so I appreciate all you're doing with the videos and working more remotely with these counties. So thank you for that. All right, can we move on to tab 7, Mark? Is that
we can, and let's keep moving us along. The next slide, there we go. So in the materials for tab 7, you'll see information that Diane provided on legislative and impact analysis. Pages 316 and 318 is helpful. And then Diane's working on completing the 2019 annual report based on the data that was reported as of the end of last month. And so we hope in the next month to have the 2019 annual report out there. In addition to that, as I mentioned earlier, Diane is preparing reports, and there's examples of those, pages 319 to 335, of breaking out our typical tables in the annual report based on race and gender. So I think those are really important additional information that we're providing. So I want to thank Diane for all of her work on that. We continue to work on other issues and policy development, the 8th edition guidelines. Pretrial DV is sort of on hold. But the last thing that I want to mention, and I sent this out to members recently, and it's posted on our website, is this certification of compliance. And this is an action item in the JRI legislation. The commission was given a responsibility for doing this certification of compliance with counties complying with the use of probation and probation with restrictive conditions. And this ties into the guidelines that we'll be talking about, the Amendment 6, because we are putting guidelines in place that then courts will be held to some degree in this certification of compliance. And the certification takes into account just the full reporting of sentences to us, which is important, and that includes resentences following revocations of probation, and then just consideration of the guidelines. And courts certainly have the ability to depart from the guidelines and so forth. But our responsibility under the certification is to make sure that that courts are placing people into programs who are eligible by statute. So they're not there for ineligible offenses. And if they place them under the guidelines and it's a departure, that they're providing a reason. So those are the key parts of certification. And certification has two roles. One is it is used to determine if counties are eligible for county IP funding, because there is a pot of money, about $18 million a year, that is distributed to counties for county IP programs like drug and alcohol treatment. And in order to be eligible for that funding, you have to have a certification of compliance. Now, this won't happen for another year or so, but what we have on the agenda and what I provided to you is the protocol, let's say, for the certification. So it describes how the certification works and the type of information the commission will be providing to counties to review, because most of this information is available from the commission. So we'll prepare the certification, but then we'll also provide other information to PCCD that they can use in determining a funding formula for any type of funding that they'd be giving to counties to support probation and parole. So this has been outlined in the materials you have. What I'd like to do is get approval from the commission for this as a framework, and that we send it out to president judges and to PCCD and others to review. And to the degree that we can, we plug in the 2019 data that we have, so that judges and others can get just a sense of like where they'd fit in, where they're meeting the standards, where they aren't. And then we get feedback, and at the December meeting, we do a final approval of the document. And then next April, as part of the annual review process, we provide this information to courts based on 2020 data. And then the following year is when it would take effect, because it would be based on the guidelines we have in place for the use of these restrictive conditions. So again, this was outlined in the materials provided. All I'm looking for is an approval or questions related to the reporting and certification of compliance, so that I can send it out to president judges for review and comment.
Excuse me. Okay, is there a motion to approve the county certification of compliance requirements as Mark delineated?
So move.
All right, Judge Tucker, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Was that Judge Daly?
Doug Morrissey, Kev.
Doug, all right, I'm sorry. I'm just guessing with the voices here. All right, it's been moved and seconded to approve the county certification of compliance requirements. Are there any negative votes? Motion's approved.
Great, thank you. Now the four final voting items are the four proposals before the commission. So we spent quite a bit of time this morning on the sentencing guidelines and resentencing guidelines. So those are the first two issues up for consideration for adoption.
All right, is there a, I guess we'll just start. Is there a motion to approve adoption and submission of the 7th edition Amendment 6 to the sentencing guidelines?
So moved.
All right, Professor Rego, is there a second?
Second, Judge Daly.
All right, Judge, thank you so much. All right, is there any discussion, any questions on the adoption and submission of the Amendment 6 to the 7th edition sentencing guidelines? Okay, are there any negative votes to the adoption and submission of Amendment 6 to the sentencing guidelines?
And Chair, if I could just clarify that the issues we discussed this morning, the recommendation staff made this morning would be incorporated into that approval.
All right, thank you for clarifying that. All right, understanding that, are there any negative votes? All right, the motion carries and Amendment 6 is adopted and submitted for the 7th edition sentencing guidelines.
Great. Next is resentencing guidelines amendment 1.
All right.
Incorporating the changes we discussed this morning.
All right, is there a motion to adopt and submit the Amendment 1 of the resentencing guidelines?
So moved.
All right, Judge Bernstein, is there a second?
Second.
Who was that?
DA Sunday.
Okay, great, thank you. He didn't show up on my screen for some reason. All right. It's been moved and seconded to adopt and submit the resentencing guidelines amendment 1. Is there any discussion, any questions? Are there any negative votes? All right, motion carries.
Next is the state parole, the initial state parole guidelines, with one amendment being that the effective date would be 1/1 of 2022.
All right, is there a motion to approve modifications to the initial state parole guideline proposals with the understanding that they would not go into effect until January 1st of 2022? And I guess, Mark, you, with the proviso as well, that you're going to be working with state parole throughout the year and 3 months or so to get that up to speed and implement those.
That's correct.
Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Sure, go ahead. Is that Representative McClinton? Is that you?
This is she.
Okay.
I've been here with the camera off. If they're not going to be implemented until 2022, then what is the urgency that we pass them at this moment? And perhaps Mark or some other member of his great team can share that with me.
Yeah, Mark, if you want to handle that, I know I asked the same question, so go ahead. I think you'd probably be best.
Sure. I think what we were looking at, based on the comments we received on the parole guidelines, we weren't sure that there were any actionable items. There were concerns about using the LSIR as the risk assessment, but we have to use a validated risk assessment from the DOC, and we evaluated all the ones they have, and that was the one that was best and was fairly generally race neutral, which was a key consideration. The other factors, I think, were not in play. We heard a lot about resentencing, so we can talk about that in a minute, or recommitment. But for the parole guidelines, we didn't see many changes that were recommended other than not doing risk or things like that. So we weren't sure what we could do, but there is not a problem in delaying if you think that's appropriate. It's just once we know what we're working with, we can work on the development of the application for the preparation of the guidelines and for the reporting of their decisions to us. But before we have guidelines in place, it's hard to do that programming. So that's the benefit of having that sort of full year to work not only on testing it and piloting it with the parole board before it goes into effect, but building that application. So that's a benefit of sooner rather than later.
Understood, and that is very helpful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mark, I'm sorry, Doug Marcical?
Yes.
So, Mark, as I shared with you, I probably have received over 500 emails in the last 24 hours asking for this vote to be delayed. I assume you had a chance to review that email. I don't know, has the other members received the same email?
The number of emails and
Yes.
I'm wondering why we have to do it now if it doesn't go into 2022. I think maybe taking a little bit of time could be helpful.
And if I can address that to Mark, based on the concerns raised in the email, do you feel comfortable with still moving forward today with that vote?
Yeah, as I said, in the emails that I received or viewed and the issues raised during the public comments that we received, I wasn't sure that there were specific actions that we could take compliant with the statute that we would change in the guidelines. But if the commission wants staff to go back and review that and bring something back to the December meeting, we're happy to do that, because I agree, if it doesn't go into effect for another year, we do have some time. But just from our review, I'm not sure that we would be bringing back anything different, but I'll look at that. Now, as I said, I think the recommitment ranges are different because there's a lot of comments there, and that may be something that it's worth, we could take a look at that, and maybe there's more work that could be done based on some of the things we talked about this morning. But for the parole guidelines, I guess I'd need a little bit more direction on specific actionable items that we might be able to do to change what is proposed.
Mark, it's Rego. I think I agree with Senator Street. I'm not so sure there's any great harm if you push back till December to give you some time to think. And I think out of respect for the concerns that were raised, I think that would be appropriate.
Yeah, staff has no objection to that at all.
Mark, Dave Sunday here. Do you see any pressing need to make a decision on this today?
No, as I said, the benefit of making a decision is that we can start with sort of greater confidence to build the application, to start to work with the board and so forth. So it just gives us a little bit more time with sort of a known quantity. If we put it off, which is fine, and if there would be substantial changes, that might change the long-term timeline too, because we may then need more time to work on it. This gives us, 3 extra months, but as I said, staff does not object at all to pausing on the parole proposals if that's what the commission feels is appropriate.
And Mark, if I may, with regard to 3 extra months, I know the work of you and your team is tremendously, I'm going to say, to me as a newer member of the commission, overwhelming at times, the amount of work that you have. And you guys, you do a fantastic job. It's really phenomenal, quite frankly. If we postpone this, what's the likelihood that there are so many other things that you are working on right now that postponement is really more of, like, there's no real material value to that? Does that make sense the way I asked that question?
It does, and that's part of my concern. That's why I answered the way I did, because there is sort of this stacking thing that occurs. Next year we are building up to really fully engage on the 8th edition guidelines, and we're trying to do some things this fall to get us prepared. But as you even heard in the public comments, people are interested in us working on prior record score and lapsing and things like that. And that's going to be done through those 8th edition guidelines. And that's a huge effort that we've done a lot on, but we got to bring that across the line. And so I see that on the table for 2021. And if we're continuing to work on sort of carryover issues, that just, it's competition for time and resources. So again, if members want additional time to think about the parole stuff, and even if it's just a pause for that purpose, or if staff should be trying to look at changes to make, we will certainly do that, because that's worth it. These are initial guidelines, and it deserves that if you feel that way. I'm just saying that from our review, we didn't see actionable items that we could take to the parole guidelines, other than like not using a risk assessment or trying to find a new one. And that may make a lot of sense, except it's just not the reality. We have to work with what's available at the DOC, and the statute requires us to consider a validated instrument.
And Mark, I sat through the hearings on this topic, all of them. And it seems to me that with regard to what we're going to be discussing next, which are the recommitment ranges, there are potentially legitimate action items for your team to work on. However, with regard to the proposed state parole guidelines, it just seems to me like we'd be kind of kicking the can down the road slightly. And so, if the rest of the commission is prepared to move today, I'm prepared to move on the proposed state parole guidelines.
DA, Sunday, you finished. I didn't want to cut you off.
I'm sorry, yes, Senator, I'm finished, yes.
Okay. Just thanks. Looking at just the notes that you have raised in the materials you presented to us, and the second one that you have under, you've raised the issue of culpability versus, in the definition of a violent offense, culpability versus a person who was, I guess, there when a violent offense occurred but didn't commit it. I mean, that's something that I certainly would be interested in hearing more about. It's an issue I'm looking at that you have on the list. I'm not sure if there's much we can do or not do with that, but it certainly seems worthy of taking a look at. And then there was talking about, there was on your note, I guess about 5 down, you have one about increasing the reliance on, or increasing the effect of rehabilitation or progress as a potential note as well. And so, I mean, look, there may be at the end of the day that there aren't changes, but I think given the extensive number of issues that even you've presented to us on this and all the communications we've gotten, I certainly would be more comfortable just giving a chance to digest a little bit of this and voting on it on December.
All right. Are there any other comments or questions? All right, so I guess right now the motion on the table is to approve the modifications with an effective date of January 1st, 2022. I guess I need to understand, I know Senator Street just pointed out a couple of ideas. Do we have concrete, are there concrete changes that you could bring back to the commission for the December meeting to try to address those concerns that were raised? Or are we really just at a place where, we're at a fork in the road and we've got to decide which path we're taking?
I think it's the latter, but I appreciate the senator's point, and I think there's there's modest things we could do, but I don't think it would change the instrument much. So remember what staff was trying to do was objectify what happens during that parole interview. So it was all just, I don't want to diminish it, but each member sort of asking questions and making an assessment of whether they thought the person was appropriate for parole or not. But what we tried to do was distill that down to concrete factors like readiness factors. And so we went through and tried to identify those kind of factors and capture those. So I think, between now and December, we could relabel some of those. We could see if there's any any data that's available in what we've collected that would give us some sense of whether that made a difference or not, because it might be just 1 point difference that really might not have any bearing on whether someone is recommended for parole or not. So it, it might be more of a labeling thing. On the issue of the definition of violent crimes or role in an offense, that is part of the discussion, and we could, build into the commentary on the guidelines issues like that to get to, I think, appropriately what the senator and others raised about making distinctions about seriousness. But the parole board also has to start with a conviction offense and a record that they're using to decide, as the baseline for starting to think about paroling decisions. So that's why I'm saying it's not that we couldn't include this in commentary or modify maybe some of the terminology, but I'm not sure it would change in any way the instrument that we developed. And so if that is helpful, just to cross the T's and dot the I's, I see no problem with us spending the next 3 months addressing some of those issues, having good responses to them, and working with the DOC and the board to just clarify any of that and bring it back. But I don't want there to be this expectation that it's going to make a substantial change in what we've presented. And I guess that's what I'm trying to get at. The other thing I'll throw out is this is a 1 year or a 1 year and 3 month delayed rollout. And if the commission finds in the next 3 months or 6 months or 9 months that the DOC now has a new instrument that we could use for risk assessment, or there's other kind of factors in play, the commission could in effect suspend things and modify the proposal or the guidelines and submit those for public hearings. So anyhow, whatever works for the commission members, if the pause is necessary, that's fine with staff. We don't want to set up expectations that at least based on what we've seen, there would be substantial changes in what we've presented.
I'm going to jump in super fast. I'm supposed to be in court a long time ago. Is there a way to put together a motion where we adopt them with that caveat that as the process goes forward, should a new assessment tool be available and or modifications deemed to be made, they should be brought back before the commission? Because it sounds like between now and December, there's not a lot that we can change, but once things start being tested, that's really sounds like where we might see the need for some tweaks.
Yeah, I guess I defer to counsel how that works, but I mean, clearly that's the intent, that if something would happen that would substantially change what we've done, we'd go through the regular process we do with amending guidelines. So I'm not sure if it matters if the guidelines are in effect or if they've just been approved and are pending that, because the commission has the authority to change guidelines. So I think the commission always has that, but I'd have to defer to counsel on whether something.
I don't see any legal bar to that. The commission can always take action to amend or change whatever's been approved at this meeting, especially with a slow rollout. I mean, this indeed would work. Now, it only gets a little more complicated if the changes that we would make, that the commission would make, were major in terms of their impact. That's a subjective determination. If they're major, then we may have to take a couple steps back. But otherwise, if it's tweaking, you can then proceed.
I think that Judge Bernstein's caveat is helpful. And Mark, I wasn't suggesting that there would be major changes, but I think some of the I dotting and T crossing would be helpful, and for a couple of respects. I think it would, for a public that largely, I think, has concerns about the next measure we're going to talk about, there's going to be some level of confusion. We adopt this one and not the other, and I think some clarifications could be helpful. But no, I understand that this one is not likely to have as many changes, the kind of changes that may occur for the other instrument.
Thanks, Senator. I agree with you on that. I think the next one's more issues.
The only reason I made the suggestion is honestly, I understand that we know that we can make those kinds of changes, but for the public where they're viewing this, my hope is that they'll see, we heard you, we don't feel there's anything major that needs changed here. And then on the next thing, we heard you, and I'm assuming we're delaying on the next subject, but that was more for a clarification for the public.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I know there's a motion on the table, but as the senator mentioned, and as I mentioned, I think the recommitment ranges, we had a lot of comments about that. And I do sense that there could be some work that we could do, maybe that don't even reflect in the guidelines, but in procedural things with the board or with the AOPC through the rules that may be worth, looking at and taking into account the comments we received. And so the reason I raise that is that if it does make sense to the judge's point about, thinking about these things together instead of sort of separately, that we bring whatever back to the December meeting, the same idea of 2022 is when this takes effect, but we might have, we might have more changes proposed to the resentencing stuff that addresses a lot of issues raised. And maybe there's no harm in holding the parole guidelines until we can sort of approve them both at the same time. Like I said, I don't think there'd be any changes to the parole stuff, but if the extra time is helpful in just feeling that the process is right and we've hit all of the issues, I think staff can work with that and we can still hit the 1/1/2022 target. And as I said, that might give us time to work on the recommitment ranges and bring something back to you for consideration.
Okay, so now let me just ask you a procedural question. I don't know if this is for you or Professor Mystic.
Oh, I'm sure it's Mystic.
Yeah, I'm sure. Do we even need a motion if we're just going to delay consideration of something until December? I mean, if we just,
We can simply defer action.
I don't have to do anything, right?
Right,
We just, that's it. And then we do it in December. That's,
That's correct, yes.
Now I get it right now, there's a motion and a second on the table. So I presume we're going to need that motion and seconded withdrawn. Is that procedurally how we would do this?
Withdrawn or tabled
Okay, so,
until the next quarterly meeting.
all right, so maybe somebody makes a motion to table the consideration of the state parole guidelines until the December meeting. Is that
I'll
what-
make that motion.
Table.
Okay, so Senator Street, and I heard somebody else rushing in there. Who else was that?
I made the motion too. I'll second it.
Okay, all right. All right, so it's been moved and seconded to table consideration of the state parole guideline proposals until the quarterly meeting of the Sentencing Commission in December. And I'll just add anecdotally that that's when I expect that we would consider the state parole recommitment ranges as well. So is there any discussion on the motion to table? All right, are there any negative votes on the motion to table? All right, the consideration has been tabled till the December meeting. And then we'll just move to the next item on the agenda, right? Because we don't even need to consider anything specific relative to the state parole recommitment ranges. They'll just be placed on the December agenda. So we can move to tab 8, is that right?
That's correct. Thank you. And tab 8 is just an information item. Our next meeting is scheduled for December. One of the issues is how we hold that meeting. So for this meeting, we advertised the meeting previously at being at the University Park office. That's where I am. But, it was a meeting via a Zoom webinar. Given the circumstance moving ahead and because we'd have to advertise the meeting, I'm recommending that we plan on a Zoom webinar for the December meeting as well. Although we can identify a site specific in Harrisburg, either our office or another location in the Capitol complex for that meeting, but it would be primarily a Zoom meeting. So just wanted to get the sense of the commission and how you want to proceed.
Members of the commission have any thoughts they'd like to share on that regard?
It's good news, I guess.
Yeah.
So the December meeting is scheduled for, we publish for 2-day meetings for Wednesday evening, Thursday morning. Thursday morning. Unless there's objections, we just publish for the policy meeting and the commission meeting for that Thursday. Thursday, the 10th of December. So unless there's objections, we'll publish that. And then the final thing, and we don't have to make any decisions today, but during the December meeting, we will have to adopt a meeting agenda for the following year. And the general procedures in normal times is that we have a dinner meeting Wednesday evening, where we have some discussion around a topic or a presentation. Thursday morning policy meeting, Thursday the 11th, the quarterly meeting. And to the degree that we need extra time for annual planning or hearings or things like that, we would use Wednesday afternoon for that purpose. So I want you to think about that, and what staff can do, maybe what Kathy can do, is send around a doodle to try to look at weeks of the 4 quarters that might, that are available, and see if we can find consensus around the dates so that we promote full participation. So if there's no comments about changing that sort of structure that we have, the Wednesday night, Thursday morning, if we're able to meet in person, then Kathy will just send around a doodle to try to find availability.
All right, that works. I mean, unless any commission members have any thoughts or suggestions otherwise.
All right. Well, I apologize for us going so long, but we did get through a lot of work. So, and it's not quite 1:30 yet. So I'll turn it back to the chair. Thank you.
Well, I think, that's all we've got. And look, again, I just want to reiterate, thanks to our staff for, the last 3 months I know have been particularly stressful with all the public hearings, and Ryan continuing the outreach and everything else like that, and just shifting over to this virtual world we're in. So thanks for being flexible and for all your work, and working to be more inclusive, and all the initiatives that we're working on. So thanks everybody. I guess do I need a motion to adjourn? Usually that one's easy.
Mystic.
Senator Street, want to make that motion to adjourn maybe?
I'll second, Rigo seconds.
All right, sounds great. All right, everybody, stay safe, and we'll see you in December.
See everybody.
Thank you. See you.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a good day, everybody. Thank you.
You too. Thank you.